I'm John Billings. How you doing? Living in Nashville, Tennessee right now. Originally from Chester, Virginia, across the river from where Keith Horn grew up, and that's probably one of the first crazy cats I ever met that influenced me to take bass a little further. I started because I wanted to be Gene Simmons. I grew up and I thought Gene Simmons was like the coolest guy ever, and I was playing cello in middle school, and that was not cool, and I was not going to meet women playing cello. And there's Gene Simmons and Kiss is rocking, so I wanted to be Gene Simmons. I asked my dad on my 14th birthday, could I get a bass? And he bought me a little K bass for $150 and a little tiny combo amp. And I bought a Kiss songbook. I could already read music and started to teach myself all the Kiss songs in the Kiss songbook and where the notes are and everything. And cello, reading music and playing cello gave me a leg up on all that stuff. So, my first bass solo was like the Gene Simmons on the Gene Simmons solo record. Should Know Something. I thought I was the greatest guy ever when I learned that song. And then one day, I went to a buddy's house, and there's this guy playing an upside down P bass, left-handed. Strung right. It was a right-handed bass strung left-handed, and it was this cat named Keith Horn. I've been hearing about the guy, and it blew my mind. I had never seen somebody play bass like a guitar and do this thing called slapping with his thumb, and it was just insane. He was the nicest cat, and I just kind of meekly went up to him at this little jam they were having and said, "Well, who do you like to listen to?" And he said, "Stanley Clarke." Who is Stanley Clarke? So I went home, did some research, and bought that first Stanley Clarke album, and again got my mind completely blown away and started tracking down everything Stanley Clarke ever did, and Return to Forever, and going to the record store if your mom would give you $10 and you try to find something for under $10 and get a Return to Forever import or Stanley Clarke's next solo album. And there's this guy named Jaco Pastorius. So I had to check him out and got hip to Jaco, and then again another mind-blowing experience. And by the time I'm 16, I'm realizing there's a whole world of players out there, amazing players that take bass to another place. And then I got really excited about it. Then I started shedding and practicing all the time. I got a job at 16. My first gig was playing at a theme park called King's Dominion. And I did that for 3 years. And that 3 years, I was 16, I'm in high school. I'm a junior in high school. And everyone I played with, they were all college music majors, and there were these amazing R&B and jazz players. So, they actually wrote out parts for me to play because I wasn't listening to anybody. I was listening to Stanley, and I'm listening to rock and roll and Kiss and Ted Nugent and AC/DC. And they're like, "Well, there's this stuff called jazz, man, and you can like play walking bass lines." And so then one day they literally wrote that out. I still remember it. I had to learn it. I was like, "What's the next note? Oh my gosh!" The drummer wrote that out. How crazy is that? And I mean, that was an intro to jazz, and they hit me to R&B. A band called Cameo, and bands Outstanding was like one of the first funk bass lines I ever learned. We'd play that between each show. You do like several shows all day long, and then we had 15-20 minutes of downtime. We go and we jam, and here's a song called Outstanding. I wrote it out for you. Read that. And we'd play that. We'd play Cameo tunes, Strange and See She's Strange and all that stuff. They came to King's Dominion that year, and I got to see Cameo at 16, and it was eye-opening. Checking out R&B groups and funk groups at the time. Rick James came there. I got to see Rick James when I was 16 years old. It was amazing. Stone City Band, Mary Jane Girls were there. So that opened a whole door of R&B, and I grew up sandwiched between Petersburg and Richmond, and there was this great R&B station in Petersburg. I started just shedding it, listening to it, and hearing these unbelievable bass players. That's in my mind, the height of musicality of R&B. That's when, you know, people were really playing. There was real chords, real changes, real melodies, and I just dived into all those guys. You know, Slave, who else? Well, Commodores. You know, a lot of in pop R&B bands still had amazing songs and players, and I would dived into all that. And I checked it out for years. After I left the theme parks, I started bouncing around Virginia in top 40 bands. I got to a place where I thought, that's it. I'm 20 years old now, and there's nothing else to do. I've played with this band and that band, and this is, you know, is this my life? So on a complete and utter total whim, I called a buddy, and Brad Henderson, Bad Brad. I called him in Hollywood. He was going to MIT, Musicians Institute, and I said, I'm on my way. I'm coming to live with you. And he's like, cool, dude. Let's just come on. So I jumped in the car, and at this point I had met the Wooten brothers. So Reggie Wooten said, I'll go along with you. My mom was all worried about me driving across the country, my old beat-up 260Z. And so Reggie came along and brought me to Hollywood. We drove it to Hollywood, and he flew home, and I started this insane adventure from that point on to today. You know, I feel like that's when my life started to me when I moved out to California. I had gone to school with this amazing bass player named James Genus. He went to New York. Ronnie Jenkins, he works for like Cyndi Lauper now. Everybody was starting to move away. Ronnie left, James left. Keith Horn was still around Virginia, but Keith was talking about splitting. I met Victor. You know, I'd seen Victor play. That's a whole nother interview in itself. It was the first time I met Vic was insane. It was just crazy to see that. Because even when he was 19, he was still unbelievable, you know, even at that age. But everybody was leaving. Vic had left for Nashville, so I decided to take off. I go to Los Angeles, and like I was telling Heidi, it was 8 brutal, hard years, but it was an amazing time because I got to do other things. I got to work in a photo shop and meet a lot of weird celebrities coming in to get their pictures developed. Back when you used to have to develop film, I was a film developer, and you know, Bad Brad led me to the pawn business. He was in the pawn shop business, and that was 6 crazy years of, you know, working in a pawn shop, which was again a whole nother interview in itself, a whole nother TV show. But I got to meet a lot of crazy musicians who sometimes they needed help, sometimes they were coming in just to look for bassists to buy, and I got to meet these amazing players, and I got to know a few of them. And while I was out there, it was a difficult struggle, but the irony was during that I got to meet some of my heroes and play with some of my heroes and hang with them, and, you know, ride to studio sessions with Alan Holdsworth in the car. We're carpooling, you know, hanging out with some of these killer R&B players, amazing cats that I used to listen to on records, and you could just go to a nightclub and there they are. You walk up, buy them a drink, or hang out with them. Tower Power's rhythm section used to have a jam at this little club called 10 Pesos when I moved there. That was in '87. And on Monday nights, everybody in LA who was anybody as a player showed up at this place, and there's Rocco playing in a club, you know, and the whole band. And by the end of the night, the entire Tower Power band would show up. The horn players, Emilio, would come in, and Doc would show up. And the next thing you know, it's Tower Power in a nightclub. And if you were lucky enough, in the rare events you were really lucky to get to play, you could always sit in, but you could never sit in with them on their songs. It always had to be Rocco playing a Tower tune. And I remember one night, crazy night, Rocco let me play What Is Hip with those guys, and it was insane. I broke his G string, you know. It was a disaster. At the same time, as much as a disaster it was like a moment I will never ever forget, being on that stage playing that song in front of him in the front row, screaming that I broke his G string. But it was, you know, I'm hanging out one night at a table with the guy, and I go, "Hi, I'm John," and he goes, "Hi, I'm Louis Satterfield." You know, he's the trombone player for Earth, Wind & Fire, and he wrote a book with Verdine White about playing the bass, and I owned that book, you know, and that was the first time I'd met like in my mind, like a celebrity, a bass celebrity. And it was just an incredible hang. We did that for like a year, getting to meet people, sit in and play with these guys. Brad and I would sneak in recorders and record the entire night, and then that whole week to the next Monday, we would shed all the material so that we could sit in on any song. They go, "What do you want to play?" Which was a valuable lesson. I just said anything. I play anything. Well, we do it a different way. I know. And just have it cover so that you could jump in on any tune. So you weren't locked into Mustang Sally. And you know what it's like when people come in to sit in, and the first thing you want to do is play a blues tune, and you just want to do something different. It's nice when they show up and they can do whatever is on the set list, and you can play with them. So that was an eye-opening year, going down there and meeting everybody in one shot. It was a great way to meet a lot of cats that some of them I'm in contact with today, 20 some odd years later. I stayed there until 1995, when I started seeing all my Nashville friends doing more gigs in LA than I was doing, living in LA. It was nothing to see Raymond Massey coming to town playing in a blues band, playing in clubs, and I'm working the pawn shop and I can't even get a gig in the town. Here comes Keith Horn, he's playing the Greek Theater. Dane Bryan is over at the Hollywood Bowl. Victor's showing up. All these guys from Nashville were gigging all over LA, and I was just working a pawn shop and playing the occasional wedding or a club gig every now and then for $50. And they all said the same thing, that Nashville was blossoming at that time. And they all said, "Come to Nashville, move back to Nashville." And I did. In March of '95, I packed a car up. I drove to Nashville. I met my wife the day I left LA. I left in the morning. I met my now wife in the evening. That evening, it was amazing. And I got to town on a Friday. The first thing that happened to me was I went and had an audition with Brady Seals on Saturday. I didn't even know who Brady was. And Reggie drove me over. Reggie Wooten took me over there, and I played for him. He's like, "Well, I'm getting ready to do this record and stuff. If you want to be part of it, sure." So by Saturday, that happened. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Chris Kent and J.D. Blair about coming down and playing for them. Just play, just come to a rehearsal, come and hang. I show up. It wasn't a rehearsal. It was an audition, and it was for Donna Summer. And a week later, I was in Brazil. So 4 weeks after I showed up into town, I'm in Brazil. I had just quit my job at the pawn shop a month before. I had just been making $250 a week for 8 years. And here I was running around Brazil. It was crazy. I can't even tell you how bizarre that time period was for me. And at that time, Nashville was rocking. So when I got off the road of Donna, I just started bouncing around like a lot of guys did. Bounce from this tour to that, Tanya, and a bunch of different folks. And everything's kind of settled down. It seems after Garth Brooks left, everything kind of blew up a little bit and it's settled down. The dust has settled. But I still work for Donna Summer after 15 years. I'm still working for her. I'm working now for her as well as Mickey Dolenz, which I love because, man, I grew up with Monkees music. So playing Last Train to Clarksville and Pleasant Valley Sundays. It was Carol Kay and all those incredible bass players. During that, as soon as I got to town, one of the things I wanted to change about my life is I wanted to get more involved in production. I'd always, when I go do records or a session, which is a completely different thing from doing a record or session in Nashville. In LA, you just pack your bass and you just show up at a studio, and usually it's just you and a producer. And you just lay a track and you leave. And here it's more of an endeavor. Everyone shows up and everybody plays, and it's a bigger deal. But it was something I always wanted to get involved in. From doing that in Los Angeles, I wanted to get involved on the production end. And I always felt that I was missing out. I'd go and play a bass line and leave, and I'd never even hear the song again. I'd never even know what the track sounded like at the end, unless it happened to get on the radio or happened to sell a couple of units and I could actually go and buy it. So I always thought it would be great to be on the production end. So about a year after I got to town, I started just purchasing gear, buying mics, mixers. I had done some small work in Los Angeles with some writers, helping them get their gear going and record the stuff, writing with them. And I started to put together a package at the house that I could sort of do that. And that's what I've been doing ever since. I've mixed about half of what I do and what I make in a year is production work in the studio, and then the other half is just live performance, tracking, recording, whatever. And I love it. It's awesome. And usually when one is down, the other one's up, and that helps make the nut at the end of the year. But that's become like a new crazy joy for me is being part of that production process from the pre-production, from songwriting to going over to the mastering lab to have it all tweaked at the end that is what gets my rocks off. Just like when I heard that first Stanley record, that's that same kid excitement I'm getting now at 44 years old. As soon as we hit the red button, I still kind of get giddy over that. And I love to have bass players over. I love to have young bass players when they're tracking with their band. And a lot of them don't know I even play bass. And it's just awesome to watch them, to see them going through that same process I went through. And that's, like I said, it's a real kicker for me. I dig it.